Welcome, everybody, to Hanging Out with Howie. Tonight, we're going to talk about safety tips, best practices for your events, equipment, guests, and how to keep your liability to a minimum using modern technology. So, let me first introduce our guest panel. Travis here to my right. We have John C. from Boston, my co-partner in crime, and my backup, Brian S. Red. And from Maryland, Bill Marsh, as always. Okay, so what prompted this was the interwebs again, social media. And actually, it was a picture somebody put up of all of their different devices that they use to save time, and they were charging them. And there were quite a few comments like, nope, copper is king. I plugged them in, used the wall warts, and that looks like a disaster waiting to happen. And I thought, wow, why aren't you guys using modern technology? It's quicker, it's safer. So I thought we would spitball on that for a bit. First off, Brian, you've put up an excellent video that had a few strange comments. I thought, in my opinion, anyway.
All my videos have strange comments on them.
They do, though. They do. Yeah. You attract the weird people, I must say.
I attract the DJs. One of the same.
But that video with the Frankenstein is brilliant because I use Frankenstein doesn't make for the subs, but I use Gator, but that pneumatic assist is really helpful.
It is.
And that was interesting that you could get that up there.
Yeah, it's like a neutral buoyancy thing. So
right.
Are you familiar with Frankenstein? There's like a shock absorber inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the ones I have are the models that handle speakers. I think it's between I'm thinking it's between like 40 and 60 pounds or something like 30 and 50 perhaps. Mm-hmm. There's one for 50 to 70 or whatever. So the concept is supposed to be, once you put them on there and you unlock the clamp or unleash the Kraken, if you will,
mm-hmm.
you're supposed to be able to easily raise them and easily
mm-hmm.
lower them.
Mm-hmm.
If the shock was too heavy, you could absolutely undo the thing and just go boing, but then you'd really be pulling on it to get it down. So it's a neutral buoyancy thing. And
mm-hmm.
Mike Ryan, the guy who makes them, he's a really, really good dude. When we used to have a lot of West Coast shows, he was at every one. He was at the East Coast shows. Dr. Frankenstein. He's like if I remember right, I know I'm right about this. He was like a professional skateboarder, like in the early days.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So he's an older cat now, but he's still a real cool cat. And he came up with this idea. And I think it's a pretty good one. So
yeah, when you come up with something good, everybody's going to copy it. I know there's a lot of brands out there. Like I said, I have the Gator ones, that are for sub poles, mm-hmm. and they've helped me greatly. And I have two good arms, but sometimes I struggle to get the 12-inch tops up on there. So
sure, it's not easy, but it's
now I know you made a video years ago about laying the tripod over, sliding the speaker onto it, and then lifting it up.
If I recall, it was actually the subwoofer. If the subwoofer has the pole adapter on it.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't the tripod, it was the sub.
Okay. So you had 4 points. Okay. Because I know there were some comments on there, and just speaking from my engineering background, a tripod, meaning triangle, the strongest geometric shape out there is a triangle. Sure. You look at bridges, there's triangles all over the place. You look at the bottom of the tripod, as they collapse and open up, you have those struts on there that are riveted in, and it's just my personal feeling. Take it up for what it's worth, you folks out there watching, that by putting a speaker on that and then lifting it up on the two legs, you have taken away a lot of the strength of that stand. That stand is made to hold 60 pounds as a unit, all those triangles working together. And I have actually seen this where over time, depending on how old or how long you've been using that stand, that friction, that'll wear out the rivets. I've seen the rivets break. I have seen the thin metal poles, which is like 18 gauge only, for lightweight. I've seen the rivets pull out of those. And I've actually seen people tip them, and even with two hands, they might have been a little bit too far and it went right over the other way. So
we should call you Howie the science guy.
I think you did that a few times. You've used other names like that.
Howie Darkstar the science guy. You're
it's
good.
So true. They call it a tripod for a reason.
Sure. Well, in my defense, with the subwoofer method that I was using,
that's
and I not getting sciencey on you here because I'm not a sciencey guy, but the subwoofer had weight to it. So
now you are being sciencey.
Well, the tripod, if I would try that with the tripod, even if there wasn't a strength issue with the tripod, would probably slip and away, and then I'd be chasing the damn thing. May not be an issue if you have two hands. When I was doing those pole mounts with the subwoofer and the 60-pound top cab, I had two hands and I had two handles on the speaker too. So I was able to grab it from 2 points and just lift it up, and it wasn't too bad to do, and then get under it and push it up with one hand. And incidentally, the EKXs have one handle on them. It'd be pretty hard to balance that tongue weight while you're doing it.
Right.
And if I recall, if the speaker's facing you, the handle is on the right, and incidentally, that's the arm I lost. So I would have to reach over, and I understand that people are trying to help and offer ideas, and I don't fault them for it, but I've thought it out, and
yes, you did.
The way to go.
Yeah, I was impressed. I really was. So, okay. Why don't we just go around the room and see if we can get some nuggets from each of you. Let's see. I'm going to go by my screen, and I'll go to Travis. Travis, do you have a best practice safety tip that you would use to keep your equipment and your guests safe and keep your liability to a minimum?
I like doing nice tight setups to where everything's close together to my booth. That way I have a little bit more control over things. If someone was to bump into one of my column arrays or one of my totems, I mean, it's hard to knock over a totem with those heavy base plates, but if someone literally puts all their body weight into it, they can knock it over.
Sure.
I use zip ties to keep the moving heads on the totems. That way, if that were to happen, the moving head is nice and secure on there. I've not found another way to actually mount them onto my Global Trust totems any other way. If I'm using my Nova Pro ones, it's got that hole for the speaker mount. Right. You can actually use the Omega brackets, the Omega clamps, and actually secure it to the top of those. So and one of the biggest challenges for me, at least in my market, when it comes to like keeping guests safe and stuff like that, is gaff tape. But the issue I'm running into is a lot of venues are starting to ban gaff tape because a lot of DJs are coming in that aren't using gaff tape, and they're using things like Gorilla Tape, and they're leaving resin, and they're just they're ripping off the resin off the floor. So that's been a huge challenge, and I've yet to actually found a good alternative solution. They make the tracks, like the construction tracks that you can tuck the wires in, but those sit about 1.5 inches off the ground, and that to me is still a major tripping hazard. So if anyone has good advice on that one, please let me know.
You know what works really well, actually, and it sounds stupid, but it does. If you can consolidate kind of all your cables on one spot, those industrial throw rugs
Mm-hmm.
work pretty good.
Yeah, that's a
You know what
Yeah.
I'm talking about?
I have
Yeah.
several of those different links for that
You use
reason.
it, Bill?
Home Depot has
When I need
Yeah.
to, if I know I need it at a certain venue, like if it's a outdoor venue with a concrete, patio,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
gaff tape's not going to stick.
Sure.
Yeah.
And to what Travis was saying too, it's not just. It is definitely a lot of it has to do with people that are not using gaff tape and they're using something unprofessional for the right purpose.
Right.
But there's also now with more and more rustic or industrial venues, both barn venues and like industrial warehouse spaces with a finished concrete floor, they might be finishing them in an oil-based product that the gaff tape will basically remove.
You have outdoor issues too, like if you're in the grass. I mean, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm. What are you going to do there?
So the mats work pretty well. To Travis's point, I just wanted to interject for a minute. When I was first, going out and doing this stuff in the 80s, I worked for this multi-op, and they did use duct tape. Every system, and there were like 20 some systems, that was part of the checklist, but they didn't call it duct tape. They called it rock tape because we're not plumbers.
Yeah.
Well, speaking to that hasn't gone away, because remember at Beret, that stage, there was actual duct tape all over that stage, and that was not coming off of that carpet. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, but I've run into that problem too, where I had a venue owner say, you cannot use tape. I said, but this is gaff tape. I don't care. You can't use it. Last week, they ripped up the paint. I just painted this wall, blah, blah, blah. And okay. So here, I'm going to do a screen share, being that we're on this right now. And I will throw this up here quick. Now, how many of us have gotten into this situation? They put baby in the corner.
Yeah.
And there you go. You've got a doorway. And what I will use, and the modern technology is out there, from very cheap solutions to, pretty much fail-safe solutions, is to use like in-ear monitors to go across that and then grab power from the other side of the door. I must admit, back in the day, I would gaff tape across doorway, but we all know Danny Max. They're one of our sponsors that make those booths and the photo booths and so forth. He was sued for over $1 million because a drunk lady tripped over he gaff taped the wire down across the doorway years ago, and they went after him. I mean, luckily he had insurance, but this, the topic, mitigate. Look, I do not ever anymore put a wire across a doorway ever. There's solutions for that. So
with lighting, it's pretty easy these days.
Yeah.
Because battery powered and wireless DMX and.
Well, absolutely. There's so much out there. So, all right, let's go over to my right, and journeyman and all around awesome DJ, John C. from Boston.
Hey there. I think the wiring is probably the most of the danger to the crowd, because when you set up your area, you should walk it when it's done and not have a hazard for yourself if the lights go out. Don't leave wires running across your path. But getting across the venue now with the wireless technology and being able to transmit DMX signals. I mean, when I was starting out in the mid 80s, you walked into a hall, it was the other side of the room was, can't get there from here. There's the entrance door and the other one goes to the kitchen. So some way I'm going across the doorway. So we either got 200 feet of cords and ran them up over the rafters, or, went to the door frame, chased the door frame up and over. But it's always been, don't leave wires in the way where people can trip over them. It's just an accident waiting to happen.
Yes, that's an alternate way. I've done that myself. If you can't afford, the technology, save up for it. But I've done the up and over the doorway thing,
The wireless transmitter for the DMX lights that I buy, which is basically just sends to one and receives to another.
Right.
It completes the chain that once I get to the other side of the room, I can run however many, because I've already got electric over there. It's just, I just can't get a cord from A to B. So that's just much safer. There's nothing anyone's going to get in the way of. And as you say, to keep your liability at a minimum, you're not putting anybody's health there at risk.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Last on my screen, Bill Marsh from Maryland, the crab capital of the world, and Carlisle Entertainment.
Thank you, sir. Great intro. I'm going to hit on one that's kind of half because of modern technology as much it is using a new modern tool. Since so many DJs are switching from tripod-based speakers to column arrays, they're losing some other opportunities to utilize the tripod for other things. Like I used to put my Chauvet Wash FX lights under my speaker, pointing up at the ceiling on my tripods. So with that gone, and not wanting to, go the crazy stupid route of mounting a light on top of my Evolve 50 or any other speaker like that, flat based stand with the multiple options for where to put the pole. Chauvet has their new ones. Gravity Stands has them. K&M has had them forever. But a flat base pole stand to me is ideal, and you don't even need counterweights if you're putting it under the base cabinet of your column array. So that's actually something that I'm waiting to get drop ship is a pair of those once they become available.
Yeah, when they become available, I'm waiting too.
That's the trick.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna throw one more thing out, since we talked about gaff tape issues and where you can't use gaff tape. A simple trick that a lot of people don't think about is when you're doing a wedding under a tent and you're on the grass, you can't obviously gaff tape onto the grass. But what you can do is use the tent itself and run your wires along basically the top of the tent, where the tent comes down and meets the poles.
Right.
Every tent has some sort of guideline or rings that hold it on, to itself, to the frame or whatever. And you can just hide the wire right in there. Or worst case scenario, you can run it on the outside of the tent, where if it's a old school tent, you can run it on the outside and just drape the wires over where the tent poles come through.
Now, you brought up a point, and I saw Brian shaking his head, and I was shaking my head too. And we know this for a fact because we know Mike Ducat from Electro Voice. And he said there were people, making plates, drilling holes in the top of those Evolve 50s. And he said, oh, no, they were not designed for that.
Right.
And look, if something was to happen, you can bet your bottom dollar that the insurance company may deny the claim, or you would lose the lawsuit because you did something that was not approved for that product. You altered that product.
Yep.
As the Bosch engineers who designed that speaker would say, Nein gut.
Nein gut. That's right.
Nein gut.
Very, very nein gut.
Yeah. Now, I do see people, if they have speakers that have fly points, they're using them and they bolt things into there. But it's just my opinion, for whatever it's worth, I don't mount anything on a speaker for that reason, because they weren't designed for that. If you're going off label, so to speak, and something does happen, you may be liable. Those flat, flat base poles. I mean, they're made to do that. And if something was to happen, then they can go after the company that manufactured those, if we ever get them, that is. So,
Another show.
yeah, another show. Yeah. So, does anybody else have anything else they'd like to add while we're on this topic? How to minimize your liability using modern technology?
Well, there's one thing that somebody told me. Jim Baxter, Colorado Sun and Light, one of the smartest people that I know.
He is amazing.
He's really good, but he gave me a call. It was years ago, and he said, "Look, I wanted to bring something up to you, and I don't know how to get it out there, but I'd love to get out there." And I tried to do a video on it, and it wasn't very well received. But Jim was genuinely concerned for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
With all of these lithium ion powered things that we have now, with lighting and controllers or whatever you have. So now lithium ion technology is incredibly stable. It's pretty safe stuff. It's not fail proof though. And it's in its most vulnerable state when it's being charged. So the suggestion that Jim made, and he really wanted to get out there to the community just as a pro tip, was just to err on the side of caution. Whenever you're charging lights or anything that's lithium ion battery powered, you should do it during the day when you're home. He just said it's probably going to be fine, but if there was going to be something goofy that was going to happen to your lithium ion fixtures, it was probably going to happen while they're in the charging state. So maybe you should be there in case there's a problem. You can deal with it instead of you going to bed and leaving this stuff charging and your house catches on fire at night.
Yeah, well, we've all heard that story about DJ Jer. He did that. He bought Chinese knockoffs that had it came with the case that would charge the uplights and so forth. And luckily, he had a detached garage. And his wife woke him up and said, "Hey, I smell something." He went out to the garage and that box was smoking. They put a fire extinguisher on it. They could not get it out. He finally had to grab a rake and he drug it out into the driveway so it wouldn't burn his garage down.
Sure.
So that's perfect. That's a gold nugget there. Yeah. Charge while you're awake and you're around. Don't charge and then be out in the yard.
Something else I try to do is not charge it like on the carpet. Like I do I do it all the time. I show videos of it, so I'm not going to tell you that I never do it, but I try to charge on a concrete surface or like a workbench surface. Just seems more safe to me that way than to just kind of putting it next to the sofa on the charger.
Right, somewhere flammable. Right.
Something I thought I'd throw out there while we're on the topic of safety.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
to add to it, I think one of the most important things that we haven't really talked about is having insurance. There's an overwhelming amount of people that are out here gigging that don't have any kind of liability insurance. And that to me is it's irresponsible, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
Well, the other weirdo thing about liability insurance, like we're talking about here, it's not enough just to have liability insurance. You actually have to be very responsible about how you're doing things. Because if something does go wrong, and let's say that you're using something a way it shouldn't be used or wasn't recommended that it was used, you can get denied a claim.
Exactly.
And that's scary too. So,
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Travis, because actually it was yesterday, I believe it was, somebody posted in a group that Brian and I started a while back, said, "I've been rolling the dice for 40 years. I haven't had insurance. Does anybody know where I can get insurance for a day? Venues start to require insurance now." I'm like, what? 40 years you didn't get insurance? Holy cow.
It's so cheap. Like it
is.
And it's if you earn enough to write it off, it's a 100% write-off. So I mean, it's like it's not just cheap; it's free.
I was just thinking.
Is this one of those no-brainer things?
And everyone else's defense, I'm going to stick up for everybody else who is like, "What are you talking about?" I didn't have liability insurance for years. I wasn't even aware it existed. I didn't think it was a thing I had to do until I was aware that it was a thing I had to do.
They didn't have it back in the 30s, Brian.
That's right.
In your defense.
Right.
I'm trying to
Forgot
help
about
you out
that.
here. Yeah.
Now, again, though, on the subject of modern, one of the things that is modern now that is not necessarily the right thing are these insurance apps where it's there are certain companies out there now where you can do that 1-day insurance through an app or through a website or whatever, and they're general liability policies, but there's one major issue with them, and I'm not trying to put on my lawyer hat this time, but one of the things that's wrong with them is they're written as like a general liability coverage policy nationwide, but they're not necessarily approved or to spec with the actual insurance regulations in every state, which are different. In Maryland, as an example, we're not allowed as a single independent mobile DJ. I cannot get State Farm or any other major brand insurance unless it's for a much higher amount, like 5 million or above, and required based on, like, if I'm incorporated. As a sole proprietor, I have to go through an association-based policy. Period.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's how it is in Jersey too. Yeah.
Yeah. Right now, that leaves me with 2 options, maybe 3, I guess, if we consider the Brown and Brown or whatever. But I mean, that leaves me with 2 options that are legit, and everybody's like, "Well, I use State Farm, or I use this, or I use that, or I have it added on to my homeowner's policy."
Yeah, a writer or whatever. Yeah.
And in Virginia, State Farm's totally legal. I used to use the Hartford here in Maryland. It was a great policy. And they were no questions asked on, like, property loss. They said, "Oh, you got receipts for it? No problem. Send it to us." But that was a whole nother subject.
I'm just glad you didn't talk about pillows for 5 minutes.
No.
Well, one thing that I've noticed, because I mean, gear, it seems like, my gosh, from where we started from with the old halogens, how it's advancing, like every 3 years, there's something new. And I know that it was meant for a quick setup, but these battery powered uplights, the side benefit of a quick setup and strike is the safety without the cables.
Yep.
Yep.
So
yeah.
I mean, really.
I did a venue. It was probably 6 or 7 years ago. Nice place. And they're like, "Oh yeah, well, we're providing the uplighting." I'm like, "Okay, whatever. I'm staying out of it." Man, they had old school halogen par, whatever they were. They weren't 64. They were the little smaller ones than that, 56 or 46 or whatever. But man, and they were next to a curtain. I'm like, "Hey man, you know what? It's your venue to burn down, I guess, if you want to."
Yeah, no kidding.
But I'm thinking about it. Yeah, I've got pictures of little kids going up to my stuff and touching it, and I see parents like losing it whenever a kid, like, it's near them. "Get away from them!" I'm like, "No, it's okay. Leave them alone." And really, I'm like, "Yeah, they'll be fine." And it's so cool to touch, no trip hazard, unless you trip over the fixture itself, which is probably another show.
That would be Karen suing you for $1.5 million.
Yeah, but she could probably do it. That's the scary part. So, you just play smart. Use if you don't have common sense, make a friend that does, and have them look over your stuff and make sure that you're doing the right thing. Yeah, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, you need sound, you need lighting. Achieve that without putting anybody in danger.
Exactly. So does anybody else have anything they'd like to add on this? Can you think of anything maybe I missed here or that we missed?
I could get a good show right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
All righty, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here. And hey, you out in the audience, if you have a topic that you would like us to discuss or bring up, we have a wealth of knowledge in here with actual, working DJs that have been doing this for decades, and be happy to answer your questions and bring up a topic right down there in the comments below when you see this on YouTube, Facebook, wherever. And we'll see you next week. Thank you for tuning in.